Awesome. So thank you everyone for joining us here this evening. What an amazing turnout, and we also have people joining us online as well. Today we are having a joint event here at the Newmarket Public Library in partnership with the Newmarket African Caribbean Canadian Association. My name is Tracy Munasamy, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer here at the Newmarket Public Library, and we are so happy to welcome you here for this event. Tonight, we are honored with the opportunity to hear from Ginelle Skerritt, a celebrated community builder and first Black CEO in the history of children's aid societies in Ontario. Tonight's talk will be an opportunity to learn about equity and gain new perspectives. And we'll also have an opportunity to ask questions and engage in meaningful discussions. I want to thank the amazing efforts of the team who has brought tonight's event together. Pauline Jones, Suzette Benoit, Jan Luttrell, Jerisha Grant Hall, and Caroline Anderson Grano, and also the volunteers we have who helped set up for this event. Tonight's event is a hybrid event where online guests will be able to watch alongside our online guests are able to watch alongside our in-person guests. Sorry, there's a typo in my notes. Online attendees can use the question tool in Zoom to send us questions, and we'll be reading them out during the question period at the end of the event. We're also going to stop recording for the question period at the end of the event. And if you're not comfortable being recorded, we suggest that you sit further in the back so that you won't be in the recording of the event. The recording of the speech will be on Zoom after the event. So now I will pass things over to Pauline.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone here. It's a pleasure to have you here. And my name is Pauline Jones, and I'm the chair of the Black History Planning Committee. And before we begin, I'd like to, with intentionality, do the land acknowledgement. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Wendat peoples. I also acknowledge that we convene this meeting upon the treaty lands of the First Nations of the Williams Treaty and the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation as our closest community. We also acknowledge that we are all treaty peoples, including those who came here as settlers, as immigrants either in this generation or in generations past, and those who came here involuntarily, particularly as a result of the transatlantic slave trade. We must also recognize the fact that this colonial nation is founded in historic and ongoing dispossession of this land's indigenous peoples and African descendant peoples. Today, we especially pay tribute to the ancestors of those of African and indigenous origin and descent. As an organization that centers on social justice, we feel it is critical to be informed on the past and the ongoing consequences of colonialism. We encourage everyone to learn about the history of these lands and to support resistance here and across the Turtle Island. We give thanks for the land that nourishes us and enables us to live in communities. May we continue to aspire to nurture and to care for this land and for each other. I always want to say amen. So I'd like to introduce our moderator, Jerisha Grant Hall. She is an innovative and strategic thinker, equity professional, and consultant who is committed to moving our communities forward through partnerships and cooperation. She holds a master's degree from York University with a focus in post-colonial and anti-colonial cultural and feminist theory, and has developed specialized knowledge in the principles of race relations, equity, and inclusion. She is the founder and the chair of the Newmarket African Caribbean Canadian Association. So we are because she is. This is a registered nonprofit organization that is focused on building and connecting communities, supporting and strengthening Black families and businesses, and empowering Black youth. There's a lot more I could say, but I'm just going to say this final paragraph. Jerisha is deeply committed to building community and building relationships. She's a dedicated leader who is driven by the desire to eradicate racial discrimination by cultivating and promoting an inclusive environment where social harmony, mutual respect, and human dignity are realized for all. Jerisha is the recipient of the Canada International Black Women Excellence Award for Canada's top 100 Black women to watch in 2022. I give you Jerisha Grant Hall.
Thank you so much. I'm sitting there going, who is that woman she's talking about? Isn't it so odd hearing someone talk about you? I don't know about you, but it sounded like someone else. Thank you so much, Pauline, for that beautiful introduction, and welcome again to everyone that's in attendance tonight. Very nice to see some new faces and some familiar faces. Is the Director of Education, York Region District School Board. Scott is here. And I see yes. The best place to be to talk about the walk, right? And I see a number of staff members from York Region Children's Aid Society, welcome, and as well as our community members that are here, and our volunteers and some of our members. So tonight, we're very excited to welcome Ginelle Skerritt. Am I saying your last name?
Skirrett.
Skirrett. Ginelle Skerritt. So we're very, very thrilled to have you in our midst tonight. And my role tonight, besides moderating, is to introduce. And I was thinking as I was preparing this, I like to give grand titles. I don't know, in the African community, we like to honor our people. And I was thinking of all kinds of names, Queen, Empress, all kinds of different names. I remember when I just started NACA, some of our early board members, they wanted to give me titles, CEO and all. I said, no, it's okay. I'm just the chairperson. So I know that we're very humble as a people. I say that very generally, and I know that we like to bestow titles on each other. So I wanted to say Empress, is that okay? So our guest. So our guest speaker this evening is, of course, Ms. Ginelle, a community leader, Empress Ginelle, a community leader and student of African ancestral knowledge. Ginelle joined the York Region family in October 2021, when she was appointed to the post of Chief Executive Officer of York Region Children's Aid Society. Her previous roles include Regional Director of UNICEF Ontario and leadership roles in the community services sector, including United Way of Greater Toronto and Tropicana Community Services. Empress Ginelle has a passion for equity, advocacy, and justice guides her leadership approach, which is focused on creating an environment for children's success, founded on mutual respect and engagement with families and communities. She combines a community-centered approach that considers the social determinants of health with a strong grounding in equity practice. Sounds like somebody that we would want here at NACA. In case children's aid. Very, very much aligned with NACA's principles. So Empress Ginelle has been the recipient of numerous awards spanning the past 3 decades, mostly for community service and leadership. She is an initiate and teacher in the Akan Rites of Passage tradition and Susu Banker Lady. Empress Ginelle joins us today to present her ideas about how we can walk with our children. Please welcome Empress Ginelle.
So it's so nice to be here this evening, and I'll tell you something. When you come to a gathering that includes African people, it is interactive. That means you don't just get to sit there. There's a participation element to this. But before I start, I want to big up the NACA crew and also those who were responsible for encouraging the town of Newmarket to have an anti-Black racism strategy. So thank you so much. If you're here in the room, let me see you. Put up your hand, give me a wave. All right, excellent, thank you. So we honor your commitment to anti-Black racism. And so before I officially begin talking, I was remiss. Mom, I'm asking for permission to speak.
Yes, you can.
Thank you. So in the African tradition, we always ask the elder for permission before we do anything. And speaking today is that. Also, I will do a verbal libation where we just call on our ancestors. And so this is the most ancient form of prayer. And normally we would pour libation and make an offering. But today I'm going to say that we are offering up our hearts, our hope, and our best intentions. And we're offering also our gratitude to the ancestors. And so I'm going to, this is the call and response part. I'm going to say that I'm calling my grandmother, Grandma Iris Thomas. Who would you like to grace us with their influence today?
My Aunt Ida.
Aunt Ida, Ashe,
Iris Malcolm.
Ashe,
Nelson Mandela.
Ashe,
Victoria Mitchell.
Ashe,
Pauline Leach.
Ashe,
Antioch.
Ashe. And when we call one, we call all. And for all those whose names are on the tips of our tongue and living deep within our hearts, we say thank you. Thank you for your inspiration. Thank you for joining us. I am Empress Abena Ginelle, a mother of 5 from a blended family. I have 3 boys and 2 girls. And really, I'm asking you today to walk with me into an African understanding of knowledge, not with me as an expert, but with me as one sharing what I know and you sharing what you know with me. So do we have an agreement? You're going to participate? Yes, okay, I see smiles, I see nods, I see, I don't know what you're going to make me do. All right, okay, so. So I expect that you have wisdom with you. Did you bring it? If you left it in the car, you know, okay. Creativity is needed, curiosity, and a sense of playfulness. So the first part, I'm going to ask my trusty assistant to help me out with that. Sure. And this is the first part of the interaction. So I'll tell you that storytelling is a huge part of the traditions, and you can start giving them out. So the younger people in the audience should take an orange card. If you're over, okay. Yeah, under 25, let's say. Take an orange card. If you're in your 30s to about 40s, then you can take a brown card. Sorry, blue card. And anything over that, please take a brown card. I think there's enough brown cards, yeah. Okay, and so what we're gonna do is tell this story together, okay? And when I call your number, you're going to read with as much passion as you can the card that's given to you, okay? So are you still with me? Yeah, okay, good. All right. So we're handing out the cards still. So this is where we needed the Jeopardy music or something to be happening. So that the cards would be up. Okay. Few minutes. Okay, so this is a story that is adapted from an African tale called Fly, Eagle, Fly. And storytelling, as you know, it's not necessarily told around a fire, but usually under a baobab tree. And you sit and listen. I remember, well, we didn't have a baobab tree at our house, but I remember the stories that my grandmother told me about growing up during the war, about standing in queues, a whole lot of things. I had curiosity about who my grandparents were, who my grandfather was, and her parents were, and so forth. So I think storytelling is a good tradition. So let's begin. A farmer went out one day to search for a lost calf. The calf was lost in a terrible storm the night before. Number one.
Dear little one, it's time to come home. The herd misses you. Where are you?
The farmer went into the valley and searched. He wandered over the hillside and the dark, tangled forests. He searched the long thatch grass and climbed the slopes of the high mountain as the river roared below. Number two.
Little one, come to Kofi.
As he approached a rock on the ledge, he stopped, for there he saw a most unusual sight, a tiny chick, very young, hatched from its egg a day or two before, and then blown from its nest by a terrible storm. He carefully reached out and held the bird in his hand. And as he approached the village, the children ran to meet him with the good news. Number three.
The calf has come back. It came back on its own. It came back on its own.
I'm going to have to ask you to do that again. These children are excited. Number three.
The calf has come back. It came back on its own. It came back on its own.
Okay, the farmer showed the children the little eagle in his hands. The eagle was placed among the hens and chickens under the watchful eye of the roosters. Number four.
The eagle is the king of the birds, but we shall train it to be a chicken. The eagle will live among the chickens, and he will call them his friends and family.
And so it was. The eagle grew, living on the bits and pieces put out for the chickens. It began to look quite different from any chicken they had ever seen. One day, a friend dropped by for a visit. Now everyone can participate. And there was a knock on the door. Number five.
Welcome.
Number six.
Hello, children. It is great to see you all looking so happy. What is the occasion?
Number seven.
We have a new bird in our chicken coop. Do you want to see it?
Number eight.
Yes, of course.
The elder, who was an experienced farmer himself, smiled and said, "Hey, that's not a chicken, it's an eagle." Number nine.
It looks like a chicken, talks like a chicken, and it eats like a chicken. It even thinks like a chicken. Of course, it's a chicken.
Number 10.
I will show you that it's an eagle. Bring me the bird, chicken.
The children handed the elder the bird. He lifted the bird's head to show him the sky and said, number 11.
You are not a chicken, but an ugly. You belong not to the earth, but to the sky. Fly, ugly fly.
The bird stretched out his wings as the farmer and the children had seen him do before, but it looked about, saw the chickens feeding, and jumped down to scratch with them for food. Number 12.
I told you it wasn't chicken.
The next day, the elder returned. He was determined to prove that the bird was an eagle, not a chicken. Elder, 13.
I have returned to prove that this is not a chicken, it's an eagle.
14.
It eats chicken food. It thinks like a chicken. It is a chicken.
The elder climbed to the top of the hut, holding the eagle in his hand. He took the eagle's head, pointed it to the sky and said, number 15.
You are not a chicken, but an eagle. You belong not to the earth, but to the sky. Fly, eagle, fly.
Again, the great bird stretched its wings, trembling. Number 16.
Fly, eagle, fly.
The bird slid down and fell amongst the chickens. Everyone laughed. Very early the next day, the elder called out to the farmer, number 17.
Give me one more chance.
They fetched the bird and set off with the bird into the early morning darkness. They were headed to the mountains. As the first light crept into the sky, they climbed the mountain. I can't think the climb. Below, they could see the river snaking along, a thin ribbon through the golden grasslands. They stopped at the edge of the cliff, very near to the top. Number 18.
This will do.
He held the eagle to face the rising sun. Number 19.
This is the sun. It gives light to the world. It rains in the heavens, giving light each day. Look at the sun. When it rises, rise with it. You belong to the sky, not to the earth.
At that moment, the sun's rays shot over the mountain, and suddenly the world was ablaze with light. Number 20.
You belong to the sky. Fly, eagle, fly.
The eagle stretched its head up, its wings stretched outwards, its legs leaned forward, its claws crushed the rock, and then, without really moving, feeling the updraft of wind, more powerful than any man or bird, the great eagle leaned forward and was swept upward, higher and higher, lost to sight in the brightness of the rising sun, never to live among the chickens again. Crick, crack, story done. Give yourselves a round of applause. So now, as we think about the idea of walking with our children, what comes to mind after hearing that story?
Let them fly.
Let them fly. Anything else?
But not the same.
Sorry?
Look alike.
But they're not the same. Mhm. Anyone else?
Guiding your kids to who they can be.
To who they can be. Yes, these are all, see, you guys are so wise.
Don't be a chicken.
Don't be a chicken. Yeah, because they're staying down on the ground and the eagle is soaring, right? A second question, can chickens teach an eagle how to fly? How many chickens have you seen flying lately? Okay, can they teach an eagle to fly? Okay, so the consensus is?
No.
All right, good, thank you. So does this raise any thoughts for you about the idea of belonging? What are those thoughts? I heard some mm-hms. What are those thoughts?
Belonging is being seen and heard for who you are.
Yeah, very nice. I like that definition. Anything else? You need to be seen and known for who you are. But what else about belonging? What makes you feel like you belong?
Acceptance.
Acceptance. Acceptance for who you are. And how do you think expectation plays a role? In the story, what happened to the eagle? What was expected of the eagle?
At first, the eagle was expected to be like the chicken
Mm-hmm.
because he was there.
Right. Yeah. And so when we think about the topic for today, walking with our children, and when we think about how I would have experienced the world as a little Black girl growing up here, think about how others experience the world. They're eagles growing up with chickens, in a sense. I certainly identify with the idea of having expectations of me to act like a chicken when I really was an eagle. right? And I want to suggest that perhaps that's what's going on with many of our children. So if we're to walk with them, there are a couple of things that I'm going to ask us to think about. First, I took the chance to reread the preamble to the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. Hello, children, welcome. And so the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child says, recognizing that the child for the full and harmonious development of his or her personality should grow up in a family environment in an atmosphere of happiness, love, and understanding, then sets forth the rights on which the CYFSA, which guides our work at the CAS, is based. So this that I just read is a tiny bit of the preamble of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. I encourage us as parents, particularly parents of Black children, but parents of all children, need to read this to understand what the rights are protected by the UN Convention that Canada is a signatory to, that is the basis of our laws around children. So I know our lawyer is here from CS. So last year I shared with this community as a part of the YRAC Black History Month, 12 actions that we can do as parents to pass the resiliency of our people onto our children. So if you can advance to the next slide. The first one is to tell them the truth about our history, the truth that predates the enslavement, which is only the story of what happened to us. But go far back and talk about the Dogon and the Ma'at and the origins of humanity. Talk about Kemet and the Olduvai Gorge. Has anyone heard of these places or things, concepts? Raise your hand. Okay, so which one have you heard of, or many?
So I've heard of the Olduvai Gorge.
It's Kenya, Tanzania.
Kenya, Tanzania. And it's actually, that's where they found the origins of man, like millions of years back. And that's where man as a race, one race originated from.
That's right, all of humanity. And so there are other origin stories that are all along that corridor by the Nile that include from the Olduvai Gorge going up to Eritrea and Ethiopia. They all have these origin stories that are told. But so we know that that is where the humanity began, right? In terms of as we know it today. So in order to teach, we have to commit to learn ourselves. I am a student of African history, and I'm in the process of self-recovery. So Bell Hooks, if you remember that, Black feminist, wrote a book called Sisters of the Yam. And she talked about this process of self-recovery. And I read that book maybe in my early 20s, which was not that long ago, thank you. And really, in order to be able to pass on the knowledge, we have to really absorb it, right? So the Ma'at, which is an ancient Egyptian text. Now, many of you may have heard, how many of you may have heard about the Dead Sea Scrolls, the 42 principles of Ma'at, or 42 teachings of Ma'at? So if you, I don't know them off by heart, but what I'll tell you is this, that within them, you'll find the 10 Commandments. Within them, you'll find what's called the Beatitudes. If you were raised Catholic, you would know what those are. But the Ma'at also teaches us 10 signs of what it means to be educated. And then there are 7 principles of Ma'at that have to do with truth, reciprocity, order, harmony, all of those things, which are guiding principles for how to live your life, value statements. But I wanted to talk today about the 10 signs of the educated, because the most important one of those to me is the ability to discern the difference between truth and false. And it's a critical thinking skill that we can teach to our children, because there is so much about them that they will hear, feel, and see in the world that is false information. And so one of the most critical skills we can teach them is to understand truth from untruth, there are other things in that section of the Ma'at that talk about freedom from resentment in the face of persecution. So that sounds like turn the other cheek to me, right? So these are ancient teachings that predate some of the teaching and where the teachings from all of the religions come together, the organized religions of today come together and can be found. And I understand that many of the scrolls and the books were hidden or burned or destroyed. However, some of them were retained. The other thing about our history that's interesting is we did the storytelling piece at the beginning. There's also a lot of information that was carried through the symbolism. We see the Sankova bird here. There's a whole story. There's a whole set of principles and ideas that go with the Sankofa bird. This is a bird moving forward, looking back to catch its own egg. The idea is that in order to move forward, you have to understand the past, but then you're standing and living in the present, right? And so it's also a story about apologies. It's never too late to say, I'm sorry for something you might have done to offend someone. So there are many stories attached to them. The other thing about African philosophy is that we understand that life is our teacher. So there is nothing that happens to us in life that's by mistake. It is there to teach us something. And so we welcome the lessons of life. But really, if life just passes you by and you're just absorbing and not critically thinking and asking questions about what does this mean? Why am I having these feelings? What is coming up for me? Really, self-understanding can only come if you do that. So you seek to understand why. What's your why? Self-awareness becomes before you can be a teacher of things. These are maybe some deep questions, but any parent of toddlers can remember that stage. When the toddler starts asking, Mommy, why? Daddy, why? Why? Right? So that's the level of curiosity we need to have about ourselves and about the things that happen to us in our life. We stop asking why at a certain point because we become mature, right? And so my suggestion is let go of some of that need to know and think you know, and keep asking why, right? Because that's how the children absorb everything. So we could learn from them. So to be at this stage of recovery from the invasions and the theft of our land, the colonialism and ongoing economic and social exploitation of our people. There was sexual exploitation as well, but I didn't mean to say that. And our resources. We need to really understand the truth of the history. Because one of the things that could happen to kids is that they start asking not why, but why me? And then what's wrong with me? And why did this happen to our people? Is it because our people deserved it? And there are social workers in the room. So we talk about when we internalize the things that have happened, right? And so this is why it's important to tell and understand how things came about. How did we come to be where we are today? Because until I processed and understood that, I was really going down that road of, maybe what they're saying about us is right. So that's very traumatic. The second one is, as you learn, walk with them so that you can learn together. And practice Ubuntu, which is, as you said, you are because Jerisha is. So we are, therefore I am. It's a foundational philosophy from the southern part of Africa. It's about the interconnectedness of all things. So as we breathe in and out, we're sharing the air in this room, right? As the air leaves this room and goes outside, the trees are absorbing it and giving us back oxygen, right? So therefore, we are connected to each other. We're connected to the life of the trees. So there's no, just because we can't see what's happening in the air around us, we learned that through COVID, unfortunately. But doesn't mean that we're not connected to each other and to it. And then, Marcy, I don't know if you could help me with this, but I think it's called mycelium. There is a membrane that grows under the trees that connects all the trees to the earth. And then, anyway, I'm not the scientist here. However, it's interesting to know those connections exist as well. So the next one is the Ngozo Saba. And there's some controversy surrounding the Ngozo Saba. So some people say, oh, the Ngozo Saba, which is connected to Kwanzaa. Kwanzaa is not really an African thing. And I'll tell you this, my grandmother, who I did call her into the room earlier, she inspires me every day. But one thing she taught me when I was very young, she said, cat born in oven don't make bread. So how many of you get that? Yes, you got it? She always talked in these sayings, right? So could you explain what it means for those who didn't put up their hand? Anybody?
Born in the oven, that means they can bake bread.
Exactly. Cat. So if a cat who's pregnant climbs into the oven and gives birth, do you say, oh, it came out of the oven, so it must be bread? No, it's still a cat, right? Cat born in oven don't make bread. So I say,
I just got it.
you just got it. That's okay. That's okay. That's okay. Director of Education.
Why?
But what I'm saying is this, if we were African when they took our ancestors from the continent, what are we now? I think so. Good answer, right? And so we're having African children, we're having African experiences. But for me, my African experience comes through a Trinidadian experience and then a Canadian experience. But I'm still African, right? Because cat born in oven don't make bread. So my grandmother was very wise, taught me very wise things. So we can find new ways of expressing ourselves. And so when I speak, I'm speaking as an African person. So my thoughts are African, my ideas are African, right? Because cat born in oven don't make bread. Cat born in oven, what? All right, good. So listen more and talk less. That's number 3. So how many of you would say that your parenting, if you're a parent, is influenced by the way you were raised? Show of hands. Okay, it's influenced that way. Then I'm going to ask you this. That doesn't mean that you're doing exactly what your parents, but influence means that you could be saying, I am definitely not going to do that with my, so now a raise of hands. Yeah, some of you are definitely not doing what your parents did. I get that, but you're still influenced by that. So we actually need to understand that even though we do it differently, we're still influenced by our upbringing. So in what year or general time period did the internet and emails and PDAs come about, where we moved from pagers to cell phones? Do you remember something like that? Yes, yeah. So I have birthed 2 boys. One is 17, one is 22. And they tell me that that was equivalent to the time of the dinosaurs. They don't understand that world, right? So my point to you is we're growing up in a completely different time. So we have as much to learn from the children as they have to learn from us. And we know that if we've ever tried to operate a cell phone. So I'm going to read a little from Khalil Gibran, the prophet of 1923. Your children are not your children. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. They come through you, but not from you. And though they are with you, yet they belong not to you. You may give them your love, but not your thoughts, for they have their own thoughts. You may house their bodies, but not their souls, for their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow, which you cannot visit, not even in your dreams. Number 4 is when it comes the time to talk, acknowledge their experiences. Don't speak over them to tell them yours. Yeah. Feeling that one. The poem goes on to say, you may strive to be like them, but seek not to make them like you, for life goes not backward nor tarries with yesterday. You are the bows from which your children as living arrows are sent forth. The archer sees the mark upon the path of the infinite, and he blends you with his might, that his arrows may go swift and far. Let your bending in the archer's hand be for gladness, for even as he loves the arrow that flies, so he loves also the bow that is stable. So we put our children, we launch them into the world, but we must remain stable and a source of reliability for them, right? So when we listen to their experiences, we're actively listening because we're there to provide that stability for them. Children have the right to give their opinions in all matters that affect them and have their voices heard. Children's views should always be taken seriously, no matter their age. That's from the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child. Number 5, share your stories with them, walk with them. Storytelling is traditionally how we pass on the knowledge of our culture. Tell them about how it was when you grew up, how you made decisions, how you learned from your mistakes and ask their opinion. Build trust with them, build resilience. It helps them if they don't believe that you have all of the answers. Teach them how to find the answers by asking the elders. We now call it mentoring, right? Oh, you can go to the next slide. Number 6, support them. Believe that they can. Ensure that it's safe for them to experience trying new things. And when they have ideas, talk with them about the possibilities. Encourage them to learn, to consult, to share your knowledge with them. Help them with homework if you can, and help them to explore doing the things that interest them. Number 7, be home for them. The safe place where they can always be loved and nurtured, not judged. Help them to feel worthy and powerful and capable by connecting them to their culture, their family, and their community. As Black parents, we have to provide home as a place of safety from the experience of racism. We have to hold institutions accountable. Trauma results from the onslaught of negativity that surrounds them. I went to a talk this morning given by Dr. Notisha Massaquoi, and she talked about 3 things that are common in the experience of both Indigenous people to Turtle Island and African people. She talked about our containment, expulsion, and extermination, and that these things are actively operating today. So 1, containment, trying to control the way we are in the world, finding a problem with it, trying to control our bodies. Reminds us of an experience that's, obviously containment, but it still happens now. When you look at 70% of the men in the federal prison in Kingston are Black men or Indigenous. Expulsion. When we look at the statistics around how often our children get expelled versus dealt with in a manner that is reasonable, within the education system. Statistically, we have a higher expulsion rate for Black children. And extermination. So we saw what happened to Tyree Nichols, is that her name? Last name. And it happens across the GTA all the time. That's extermination. I know we are accustomed to seeing images of bodies hanging on trees in the US, and we like to pretend that here, this is not happening. But all these things are happening today, right here in Canada, to Black children. They're living with that. So really, I wanted to also point out that there are a total of 9 mentions in just the first section of the UN Convention about children's right to their identity, culture, religion, language, spiritual development, education that is consistent with their dignity as members of the human race. So number 8, teach them to respect women. Women have carried our stories, our culture, our traditions, and have been at the forefront of our struggle. We are only going to advance as a people if we recognize the sacredness of women and their inherent connection to the creation of life. Earth is our mother, just as women are our mothers. Women are the quintessential icons of resilience in our communities, and our wombs are a part of a sacred covenant where life is nurtured and brought forth into the world. So something I wanted to say about when African philosophy talks about men and women, they're talking about male and female energy. So I don't want to take it in the context of the binary conversation we're having right now about people having, because as we know from, I don't know, what was it, grade 10 biology, the XY chromosome, like we all have both male and female energies within us. And so that's what we're talking about, right? Number 9, next slide then. Teach them to respect men. Men are the fathers, nurturers, protectors, providers, and caregivers who provide guidance, advice, support, and wisdom. They are co-leaders in our families and communities. This is a critical teaching in a world that's devalued them greatly. We need our men to be respected and loved and to feel worthy so that they can step into their greatness. Our resilience depends on being able to recover from the onslaught of negativity aimed at the men in our community. It is a particular issue. So being one girl with 6 brothers, 3 boys, a husband, I could tell you that I feel that and I understand that. And when you look at who's dying, who's part of that extermination, it's mostly Black men, right? When you look at containment, it's mostly Black men. It is happening to Black women as well. And I had an interesting, I had the opportunity to listen to an interesting speaker who was talking about this whole idea that supporting women and girls in Africa is the way to go. But what it has done is hollowed out those communities for the support available to men. So sometimes when we think we have a solution, we're creating another complex problem. And also the other thing is that when things are conceived of in the minds of people who are not us, remember that chickens can't teach the eagle to fly, right? So the eagle really needs some help. So I think in that story that we told, sorry, you helped me. In that story that we told, the elder played the role of an ally to that eagle, right? So we do need each other, getting back to Ubuntu and interconnectedness. All of us need each other. Number 10, teach them to love themselves and to know themselves as full beings that are physically, mentally, and spiritually protected and guided by the ancestors and by our traditions and teachings. You know, I think one of the things colonization has done and the many invasions has separated us from that understanding of our ancestors. I've taught my kids that don't be afraid of the idea of ghosts, because that's not our culture. In our culture, we welcome if the ancestors are among us. We understand that they're here to guide us, and we appreciate that. And there are so many other things I could say about that, but that I'll stop there just to say that we have to understand and start practicing who we are, but we have to go through a process of reconnecting with that information, because everything that has been taught to our people has taught us that those things are not okay. Those things are othered to us. And so we need to recover and reclaim. Number 11 of 12, so I'm almost done. Teach them what we have always known, that their success is their divine right and gift. And that as long as they're breathing, they have a purpose on this earth. And so there's an interesting that I wanted to share with you about the power of expectation and the difference between expectation and aspiration. So there was a study in 1968 by Harvard professor Robert Rosenthal and elementary principal Lenore Jacobson about the impact of expectation on motivation and achievement. Those of you in education may know this really well because it's a popular study. And later studies applied the principles learned there to parental expectations and involvement in school, communication style, helping with homework, expectations. When they looked at parental involvement, I should say, and they look at all the ways that parents are encouraged to be involved, join the PTA, the single most influential impact was expectation on children. So think about then, if you will, the expectations, if you just take a quick scan in your mind of social media, of television, of music, and what expectation comes up about Black boys, Black girls. I'll tell you, they've taken it down now, but I used to be able to say to people when I speak, take out your phones and Google Black woman. And then take out your phones and Google white woman. And this was a few years ago, but because they've changed it now, because I think a lot of people raised some guff about it. But when you Googled Black women, you started seeing body parts that were exposed, open legs in front of you, if you can get my picture. When you Googled white women, you got wholesome girl next door, pushing a pram, married, really just wonderful stuff, right? And so there has been a change on the internet, at least. But that's something that I just used to bring to the attention of audiences. But now I'm saying that we can still imagine, because we know what the stories are and what the narratives are about who Black children are. We hear about it when we hear stories of children being tried as adults. I think there was it was on LinkedIn the other day, I saw that there was a little girl, 9 years old, and she was spraying a substance on the trees in her neighborhood. Read about that, right? And the 911 call was, there's a little woman spraying something on the sidewalk on the trees. I don't know what it is, but it's scary to me. So this was a young girl doing a science experiment to try and kill some invasive species of insects. Anyway, she ended up getting an award and all that kind of stuff. But just think about that. She is a suspect, not, oh, there's a little girl doing something amazing for her community. Anyway, so expectations are that we set as parents are important. And I think that's what I want to say in this section here, that teach them, first of all, that their success is their divine right, and that you expect them to be successful, because the counter messages that they're going to get outside are not good. We've got to raise their level of confidence with that expectation and our belief in their ability to succeed. It's not the same as pressure. It's not punitive. It should feel loving, uplifting, and encouraging. It should be supportive. Remember number 6, support them. And the final one, teach them that we are dependent on them, living up to their full potential. And that's because of the ancient wisdom of Ubuntu. They are because we are. They are not alone, and neither are we. We are all connected. The dominant culture disregards the elderly, but they're still here. They're still part of the living. They still have a role to play. And so we need to develop with our children an intergenerational narrative. That's a return back to reclaim some of our cultural heritage. So my closing message is that resilience is to be found in connecting to ourselves, reclaiming our cultural practices, knowing who we truly are. The connection between Africa and the diaspora means that the circle is unbroken. And that's the name of a book by Marimba Ani that I would recommend people to take a look at, because it has to do with how we have retained the traditions and the ideas and the spiritual practices. Some of us, it's unknown to us what we have retained, but it's there. For me, it's the susu, which I got from my mom, which she got from her atmosphere, right? Like just growing up in Trinidad, being around. Spirituality, understand the ancient roots of our beliefs. Resilience, connection to spirit, unity, shared history, identity, a unique expression of ourselves. Creativity. Allow your children to explore, to ask why, to be creative, to be playful, to laugh. Healing. In our community, the artists are the healers. So, you know, we dance, we sing, we tell stories, we do poetry, we write, we draw, we express what is inside in these ways, and that heals us. That's the belief. Ngoma, right, is healing, dance, drum, healing. Art is a medicine, and so are the plants and everything around us. So there are many mixtures that we make that are for healing different parts of our bodies. So I would say that there are year-round activities that you can do with your children to build knowledge and connect. And so the last thing is, after you ask why, and after you come to those conclusions, and after you really connect with your children I want you to do this. Think about, just close your eyes with me for a moment. And we did this morning at the talk that I was at, and I thought that's so brilliant. And just think what the world would be like for our children if we successfully eliminated racism. And so you can open your eyes now. I want to take the time to imagine that, because if we can't see it, we won't be able to do it. But it's really necessary so that our children don't have to go through a lot of hoops to build resilience. Ashe, good night. Thank you so much for your attention. Oh, thank you.